Hello, it's Peter Wright and Kathleen Beauvais in Ontario, Canada, with episode number 23 of the Yakking podcast. And this is where we talk about life, business, and more, and we bring you tips and ideas for a changing world. And we have another interesting guest for you today, a departure from our authors we've had recently, but somebody who's got a fascinating piece of equipment to talk to us about and very relevant for the times we're living in right now. But first, let me welcome my co-host, Kathleen. Hello, Kathleen.
Hello, Peter. Welcome, everyone. As usual, we appreciate you tuning in, and we do have a very special guest with us today. His name is David Conklin, who has developed a water purification system. Is just absolute genius, and wait till you hear about this. So welcome, Dave, and please go ahead and tell us more about you.
Well, thank you, Peter and Kathleen, for inviting me. I'm speaking to you from Portland, Oregon, and on behalf of Day Zero Products. I'm a climate change researcher by trade, and 2 years ago I was attending a workshop on what to do for safe water to drink after an earthquake or other emergency. And I heard a water engineer talk about a device that he had invented for his family to use when they were in Uganda for a year. One thing led to another. We became friends, and ultimately we decided that we would try to make this invention available to the public.
So, I mean, this is just, tell us more about this water purification system, because I mean, we're going to put your contact details at the end of this podcast as well as the video so that people can go and check it out. But describe how it operates. It's handheld, it's by crank, or you can plug it in, but just tell us a bit more about how it works.
So the inventor who holds the patent on this device is Paul Bird. His day job is as a water engineer for an international engineering company. And so he specifies and designs and installs industrial scale, municipal scale water treatment systems. Many of those systems now, especially in Europe and the United States, use ultraviolet light, germicidal ultraviolet light, to disinfect the water, the drinking water, from viruses and bacteria and parasites which might otherwise make you sick. So this industrial scale process is something he's very familiar with, and what he did with his invention is to scale it down to the size that a single family can use it. So our invention here, I'll hold one up.
Yes, please.
This is a box about the size of a, I don't know, a large lunch box or a small bread box. My assistant here points out that this one doesn't have a crank, but inside there's a UV light bulb.
Right.
And I don't have a crank model handy.
All right.
So what happens is you take the box. If you don't have electrical power available, you turn the hand crank for a minute. 1 minute, 1 gallon. The box holds 1 gallon of water. And that's an adequate germicidal UV dose to sanitize the water. It's the same dose that's used generally by the industry in municipal systems.
Right, very good. I have a bit of a farming background, and certainly we've used some of those systems on the inlet side of water used in both greenhouses and in packing sheds. So yeah, and it works very well.
It's become way more widespread in the United States since about 2003, I think, when the EPA included UV treatment in their rules for municipal water treatment.
Right. Something that will certainly interest our listeners before we get into more technical stuff is how you came up with the name of Day Zero. That certainly intrigued me when I first read about it.
Well, you're probably familiar with the Day Zero in Cape Town 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
Right.
Day Zero was what the date on which the city water system would be turned off. They called it Day Zero. Fortunately for Cape Town, it didn't happen.
Right.
But in further reading, I discovered that there are Day Zero events happening not just in Cape Town, but in South America and in Asia and in India, points in time at which the municipal water systems run out of water because of drought. So our product is for those times when you can't drink the water from the tap, either because there isn't any water or because it's not safe to drink. It's been contaminated in some way or another.
But there are, go ahead, Peter.
No, I was just going to say, Dave's quite right. It's still a huge problem in many parts of Africa. I lived in Rhodesia and in Zimbabwe and South Africa. My one son is in Zimbabwe, and they regularly, in the cities, regularly have days when there is no municipal water supply, and they have to use either rainwater they've collected or water they've stored. So, yeah. So back to you, Kathleen.
Peter, I have a question for you.
Sure.
On those days, how does your son and his family treat the water that they collect from rainwater or from some other source than the tap?
All right. So my son is fortunate. They're on a farm and they have what's called a borehole there, a well, as we would call it here. But they don't sterilize that water generally. If they are in the cities and they run out of water, they quite often use chlorine, the same as they would put in the swimming pool to sterilize the water. And very often the swimming pool is their reservoir for drinking and washing water when municipal water is not available. But of course, the bulk of the population doesn't have access to swimming pools. So they are collecting water from streams or some terrible places. Yeah.
And do you think the bulk of the population is using chlorine?
No. The bulk of the population are so poor, and especially with this virus thing, when they are really struggling to find anything to eat, they are just drinking whatever water they can, or they're boiling it, which is the point you make on your website that I think you say you estimate 600 million people around the world are boiling water with fire using some fuel which generates pollution, of course. So that is the situation there, very much so.
Yes, and this box was really invented to take the place of boiling water and to make it less necessary to burn biomass fuels to prepare to treat water for drinking.
Right. Kathleen, you had something there for Dave.
Or Dave, are you planning to produce a system that has a filter?
We probably won't make a filter, but we may make a filter available that's from some other manufacturer. We haven't added that to the product line yet.
Right. So, your system, as you mentioned on your website about the 600 million people worldwide, and these are people that are in distress and can't access purified or, clean water to drink. But there's also another demographic, another market for this, where people are wanting to prepare just in case. So people that live in cities and even in North America, people, I think they call them preppers, where they are seeking systems like yours and just to keep that in case anything happens. I have a river running behind my house. If anything happens, if I had your system, I could technically go and get myself some water out of the river and just use your system, correct?
That's correct. And you've put your finger on it. The Day Zero product is being marketed. We're just beginning to market it here in North America exactly for that purpose, for the preppers. For here in the Northwest, we anticipate or we fear very large earthquake. So the idea of the product is to make individual households and individual families more able to cope when a big disaster happens. But there is, in addition to that, another use as well. In our own household here in Portland, we use tap water, which sometimes has low levels of cryptosporidium in it. Our Portland Water Bureau is under a consent agreement to make people aware that they have sometimes cryptosporidium and to fix the problem, but it's going to take some years to get it fixed. And in the meantime, we use our water box every day to treat the water that we use for drinking and cooking. Now, I don't have to crank it because we have power available, and I can just plug in an AC adapter.
Sure. There is another aspect to this. I was quite amazed when I came from Africa. Where we had wells, we always had great big overhead tanks, and a lot of our houses ran on gravity. They didn't have a booster pump or a pressure pump in the basement like we do. So when I came to North America, to Canada, and I'm living on a farm, and I discovered that you can't have an outside overhead tank because it will freeze. So the moment the power goes out, that's your water supply, because you only have about enough water to flush two tanks of a toilet flush in your pressure tank. And then when the power's gone, wow, and there's no pressure, you've got no water. So we store water in buckets. We do have a generator now, but very often that stored water has been there for some time or contaminated. So again, for a huge number of people, your machine could be a lifesaver.
Yes, again, in the Northwest here, we're fortunate to have abundant water. Mm-hmm. You can always get water. It's not always safe to drink.
That's the thing, yeah.
Right.
Get it out of streams and rivers and ponds.
Sure.
And if you can get it at all, you can make it at least more safe to drink by running it through a water box.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And now that we have this pandemic, Dave, I'm reading on your website that this system can kill, can kill any viruses and bacteria. I mean, that's what it does, as well as the corona.
Well, that's true. There has been a good deal of publicity about using ultraviolet light to decontaminate used surgical masks and other personal protective equipment. And in the beginning, there was little knowledge about just how much UV it takes to do that. After some research, we discovered that the doses that are being used by the medical professionals are many times stronger than the doses that are used in treating water. Mm-hmm. Due to the nature of the materials and the fact that solid materials shade, UV light doesn't pass through the solid material that's used in personal protective equipment. So the water box, even though we've got it on our website at the moment as a light box, a version of it as a light box, the doses that it produces are not as strong as the doses used by hospitals and clinics to decontaminate material that they want to reuse.
Sure.
Very shortly, it'll come off of our website. There's a considerable amount of blog posting on the website about the research on this topic. The other thing is that coronavirus is not being spread through water supplies. But the fact remains that the specifications for the water box are using the industrial specifications for treatment of water. It just turns out that sanitizing a smartphone or a surgical mask or other solid devices requires different kind of dosing that our water box is not really appropriate for.
Right.
Right.
Okay. Dave, can I ask you a question on production? I know on your website you've got a couple of models of each prototypes. What's your program for getting production going?
Well, we have run two small pilot runs. We're about to do a third pilot run, and we expect to be in limited production by the end of June.
Okay, good.
The pilot runs are intended to establish that we know how to build a particular version of the model, and each time we do a pilot run, we add some improvements.
Right, right.
Excellent. Are you looking for investors at the moment then, Dave?
We recognize that to scale this up as would be necessary if we were to make use of it in Africa or in Asia, it will be necessary to have somebody come in who has the capital and the know-how that, frankly, we lack. And so, yes, we're looking for a partner organization or a knowledgeable investor to help us with this venture.
Okay. I think it's interesting. I'm going to throw in that I saw your machine, your picture of your machine on, I can't remember exactly where. And then I think I found you on Twitter, did I not? Or was it?
I think it was Twitter.
Twitter, yeah. And we made contact there. And then I put a little bit on our blog, and we've had quite a few people reading about it on there. And I'm hoping that some of them have gone on to your own website. So again, the power of social media, something that in our youth or from our generation was not even invented. Now we're finding it's spreading technology like your unit. It's quite amazing.
Yes, Peter, you and I are of the same generation, but you're ahead of me. It's not me that you found on Twitter. It's our web guy, who is Jonathan Bailey, who is considerably younger than I
am. Okay, yeah, but I still find it's good that we can pick up this information with so it's really good. I'm going to ask you something from your perspective as a climate change scientist, and this is somewhat tongue-in-cheek. I'm concerned that many of the advocates for protecting the environment and stopping pollution have got onto the use of masks and gloves bandwagon for the coronavirus. And I don't really want to open up the whole debate of how serious it is. As someone who's obviously really concerned about the environment, have you got any thoughts on that?
Well, when I go out in the city where I live, I put on a mask. The mask is as much a symbol of taking the pandemic seriously as it is a practical measure for my protection or for the protection of people around me. The mask does protect the other people from if I were to be a carrier. I'm not aware that I am. I hope I'm not. But it also signals that it's this is not a matter to be taken lightly.
No, I understand.
Of course, if you're in Montana, it's a different thing.
Yeah, yeah. My concern is how quickly sentiment, for want of a better term, has switched from we must all do everything to protect the environment to yes, corona's bad, so let's just use stuff that might end up in landfills. It's an attention thing. That's the point I'm trying to make. Is
okay. Well, I missed your point, Peter. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
First you have to solve the problem that's right in front of you before you can solve the longer term problem.
True. Yeah, I've got another question on water. When I lived in South Africa, and I left there a long time ago, I know that the speculation was that the limiting factor for population growth in South Africa would be availability of water. And I seem to remember a figure of 60 million mentioned, and at that time the population was in the 30 million range. It was under 40. I think it's closer to 50 now. And that's, I think, also important for big parts of Africa. So anything that can make water more usable, like your machine, would certainly take some of the pressure off there, wouldn't it?
Yes, and it empowers individual households to look out for themselves,
right,
in places where the larger systems are not reliable.
Yes, good point. Good point. And then, Kathleen, have you got another question for Dave?
I was just curious, Dave, do you think that down the road, this technology that you're using will evolve, not just about water, but with other different systems? And do you have a comment on that?
Well, I think our current venture is focused on making safe water.
Mm-hmm.
UV has other uses, of course. Ultraviolet technology does. And there are other technologies that are germane to the problem of making safe water, as you pointed out with the filters. I think we'll focus on water, and if the thing takes off, I'll be happy with that.
Actually, it's a question of when, not if.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think this is a winner. I really do.
Well, I appreciate you bring me on your podcast. I think that'll be a big help.
We'll get you as much publicity as we can, and this goes out to our Twitter followers, LinkedIn, and we get quite a lot of interest on our videos on LinkedIn and Facebook and that. So we will certainly do a bit. You mentioned on your website again the company Aqua Aero. They do the big industrial scale ones, do they?
It's interesting how we ran across them. They have a product called a UV water box, which was exactly the name that we first put on our product.
Right.
Their UV water box costs about $2,000 or $3,000. It includes solar panels, and it is adequate for more like a village scale than a household scale. They are managed by a very friendly fella in in a city in the Netherlands, and he and I corresponded by email and concluded that we could manage that. My product was not a threat to his, and we adjusted the name of our website a little bit.
Right. And it could be complementary, because individual families who buy your unit in a village could get interested, and then from there they could pick it up. So
that's true. And if you look carefully at the footer on our website, there is a link to his website in the Netherlands.
I followed that link. Indeed, I did. Yes. Carry on. No, you go, Kathy.
I was just going to ask you, if our viewers and listeners wanted to get a hold of you, how do they do that? Can you tell us your website address and your email, or whatever contact details you'd like to give?
Yes, the best contact mechanism is the website. Okay. The URL is UV-H2O-Box.com. So UV-H2O-Box.com. We used H2O instead of water, both out of deference to our friends in the Netherlands, and also because it's the universal chemical symbol for water, recognizable in languages other than English.
Absolutely. No, good idea. And we will certainly have that available for people who watch this video or listen to the podcast. They can make contact through your website. And very good. Dave, we have about 2 minutes left. Any final words you would like to mention?
Final word I want to mention is a thank you to both of you, Peter and Kathleen, for giving us a chance to talk about our water box.
You are most welcome, and thank you for coming on. And we will stay in contact with you with great interest to follow the launch of your product and as you increase production. And we will be mentioning it again on our Tiny Homes website and on our Facebook pages on an ongoing, because we see it as a real, as Kathleen said, really important addition for tiny homeowners. Kathleen, final words from you.
I thank you so much, Dave, for joining us today. We really appreciate you, and thank everyone out there for tuning in.
Thanks, Kathleen. And until next time, that's us. Bye.